for in case someone has missed it, but just that I wanted to underline the fact that a topic like this really is not out of keeping with an FDP or an orientation program even, because I think all of us, particularly after 2020 and the pandemic which began, are very, very sharply aware, like never before, about mental health issues. And for all of us who are engaged in education, I think the meaning of mental health gets even more sharpened, and the fact that we need to do something about stress and stress management and why we need to look at that. Probably a lot of things that I say today are not going to be very different for many of you. Maybe all of you are very aware of it. I don't know the number of years of teaching that each of us has had, but we've all been students. To be here as teachers, we've all been students. We continue to be students in a learning teaching environment. And so therefore, it's very important that we are conscious of the processes that are currently enrolled or registered students go through, because this is as much for our own development first as compared to how we are going to be able to help our student population or our staff and colleagues. So broadly, I will be talking about, stress and its management and understanding stress as a concept, and why do we need to pay this kind of attention to it, from various perspectives. So let me begin by, I'm not sure if my slides are visible. Today there is very poor internet connectivity, as I was explaining earlier. So forgive me if there is a disruption to the use of my slides, but I hope it should not be too difficult. So I've taken the liberty, and I'm very grateful to Mizoram University, which has been the university I worked with for the longest time. I worked for 12 years with the Mizoram University. And so therefore, when I'm talking, why I'm mentioning all of this is to say that this is the perspective that I will be offering of having worked with the University of Delhi and having worked with the Department of Social Work at Mizoram University, and now being with the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in its location at Guwahati. So there is a perspective that has been built with all these experiences of central universities, and then working with a public funded deemed to be university, which is what Tata Institute of Social Sciences is. So I've taken the liberty, Dr. Mehti, of just nuancing it a little more and saying that it is stress management that I'm primarily going to be speaking on, but also lead it to the larger issues of mental health for effective team building, or actually, I would say that, I would go with a newer title of saying that it would be more to do with mental health in teaching learning environments. So just give me a second. I think there is a problem with, yeah. So with, I had put up a small picture, which I think was quite visible. If any one of you can tell me what is it that comes to mind in that picture that I put up of a balance, and why that is an important area for us to be talking about. I usually begin all talks on mental health with reference to this picture of the balance, And can anybody, since this FDP is that we are all talking to colleagues, we are among colleagues, we are talking to colleagues. So if somebody can just tell me, why is that picture of a balance important when we are talking about stress? You can chat, you can just type it out if you prefer that. I'm going to try and see that the virtual and online classes are not something that leaves us with a lack of opportunity to express ourselves. Can I show yes, I can show the picture again. Just a second. Like I said, there is just some problem with the internet today, and it keeps So this picture that you can see now of the balance, how and in what way is it linked to mental health? And I know that there is a small definitional attempt that is there, but from your own perspective, how would you conceptualize this whole concept of the balance with mental health? Does anybody want to unmute themselves and speak? Probably some of you would like to type it in as I go on. So, you know, I'm just trying to make it a more interactive medium. Thank you. I think there are some responses. Yeah, I can see that Professor Madhurima has written that it's a balance between negative and positive emotions, not swaying in one direction. Extremely correct use of the term balance to say that it is something that is midway between two extremes, definitely. I also like what is that Professor or Dr. Savitri who has said, health and stress both must be in balance. Very important. That your health has to be in balance, your levels of stress also. So you're introducing already the concept of stress. So let me try and move on. And if anyone has anything to add, please keep putting it in the chat box and I'll try and pay attention to it while I'm taking the class. So if we were to look at this term stress, you know, so, you know, there are kinds of images that are always associated with being stressed, where your hair is on edge, every aspect of your being is alive and aroused. And, you know, we have all kinds of jokes associated with people who are highly stressed here, like the one that I put up over here, that the simplest stress reduction kit that has been known to most human beings is literally banging their heads on the wall. And that's the way they control their stress. Not at all advisable, not at all something that we would want to follow. But if you were to, humorously put it, it's like saying that this is a stress reduction kit, bang your head here, place kit on the firm surface, follow directions, and repeat the step if necessary to manage your stressors. And that's how much at a wit's end that most of us are at when we are highly stressed. Let's move on to say that the way in which we look at stress and at stressors, when we say stressors, we are saying triggers or factors that impact the level of stress that all of us mean. And there is an article that says that, typical symptoms, and you will see this in as many articles as you read, they will give you as many possible reasons as to why somebody might be stressed out. And they say that eating too much, eating too little, impulse buying, okay, shopping, retail therapy as it's called, and driving too fast, all of this is linked to that. And so there's a humorous take on it to say that, are they kidding? That's my idea of a perfect day. So, you know, you have different people reacting to the same issues by saying that we cannot look at stress as just objective indicators, that there's a subjective level of how we perceive stress. Yes, thank you, Dr. Santosh Kumar. You have said that without good mental health, we cannot enjoy our achievements. That reminds me very much of a, very interesting interaction that we had with the Honorable Chief Minister at Mizoram about 10 years ago, and where we had university faculty from Mizoram University who were invited for a day at the Chief Minister's residence, and the entire cabinet was also invited, and they had a session where they talked about from day from the beginning to the end, we started at about 10 o'clock in the morning, I think, or 9:30, and we went on till almost 10 at night. And every faculty member who was invited was asked to make a presentation on a subject that he or she was an expert of. And they said that that would help in policy building in the state. We thought it was a lovely initiative, and we wish most of our legislators and politicians would actually do such exercises in our respective states, because we had people from economics, we had people from political science, we had people from agriculture, forestry, and each of them had made a presentation regarding a policy that can either help in increasing the vote bank or help in increasing the coffers, or the treasury department. So there were new land use policy, there were issues related to fiscal trade, there were issues, lots of things that came out. Ours, a couple of us from the university, one of my colleagues from the Department of Psychology, Professor Laldin Puifente, and I, we were invited to do the session on mental health. And Dr. Santosh Kumar, this is exactly what we said. We said that we are presenting this at the end of a long day, as was the last presentation. And we said that, to the Honorable Chief Minister, that whatever you may do in terms of increasing your vote bank or increasing the money that comes in, the revenue that comes into the state, none of that is going to be realizable unless we have sound mental health. And so therefore we made our presentation on why mental health is important, and not just something that is seen as esoteric and something that others talk about. This is the urbanized world. This is a very classist way of talking about it, or all of those criticisms about this is something that's imported from the West. We don't look at people in the form of labels and all of that. All of those criticisms also have a merit. But the underlying point is that mental health is of very, very great importance. And today, the world over, whether it is the WHO or it is the UN organizations, we are way back in, I think in 2020, we started the lockdown in India in March 25th. Some of the other countries had already gone into lockdown by then. Already by May, we had, I think in April 1st, there was a Lancet article on the importance of mental health during the lockdown and what quarantine itself does to mental health. So there were all these issues that kept coming up. And by May, we had the WHO and the UN Secretary General talking about mental health being the next big pandemic. So that was the importance of why we need to be talking about mental health. Tragically, we are all seeing deaths by suicide in the period of the lockdown also. Even more sharply, we are aware of the tragic nature of human beings not being able to come to terms with their life or their existential issues, and they are immediately succumbing to the only alternative that they know, and that is dying by suicide. Today, we don't use the word committing suicide, because committing has a connotation as if I have a conscious effort in it and I'm doing something with clear rational judgment that I'm exercising. Whereas really a person who is depressed and who does end up dying by suicide has no control. And we will try and look at that. Thank you for the comments that are coming in. And now let me look at, okay. So what is stress really? It's a biological term that we use. It's the consequences of the failure of a human or an animal to respond appropriately when it is faced by any kind of perceived threat to ourselves. So it could be actual, it could be imagined. If I believe that there is a lot of issues that my employers are having with me, it may not be a real fact, but imagined itself can create my body to undergo physiological responses, psychological responses, behavioral responses to that imagined threat. And it is as genuinely going to affect me or impact my health as a real threat, like a real threat of seeing, probably walking down a road, and we give these very textbook examples of walking down a road in the middle of the night and encountering perhaps a tiger in front of you, or seeing, for a woman, the kind of stresses of walking down alone at night or day even, and encountering a male who is threatening to him or her. So that is the kind of response that we are referring to. And when we talk about stress management, we are saying that it's the application of methods that we use at a conscious level or otherwise to either reduce the stress or to be able to increase our tolerance to stress. When we say increase our tolerance, not necessarily a good thing to do, but sometimes we use adaptive or maladaptive ways where we increase our threshold as to what we consider stressful. So it's a normal reaction. We always say stress has no connotation to it. It's not, good or bad in itself. We just say that it's a normal human reaction. It's perfectly all right for all of us to experience stress and feel stressed. And we'll tell you why it is perfectly all right. When we experience, challenges or stressors, we produce both physical and mental responses. And these help us to adjust to new situations. So when I'm not stressed, like say, for example, I see this uh, tiger in front of me on a night. Now, what I will do is, only because I'm stressed. If I'm not stressed, I will keep walking along and probably I won't be sitting here talking to you today, if that was the situation, right? But if I am stressed, it will teach me the usual common ways of what we call fight or flight. Either I look at this and I say, okay, it's a tiger cub, I can manage this, or I say it's a tiger which is much larger than me, much stronger than me, I won't be able to sing. So I'll need to adapt to the new situation. So it helps us to keep ourselves alert. It helps us to be motivated and ready to avoid danger. So these are some of the normal reactions that we have. So we are using the terminology, a lot of mental health, unfortunately, and issues related to psychology, they use technical terms. And we are talking about homeostasis, and which all of us are aware. You use it in the sciences, and you have a certain connotation to it. In psychology, all that we are saying is what some of you have already commented, that there is a balance between the positive and negative emotions, as Professor Madhurima said, or between health and how we keep our health, just like a balance. And if we see this picture, it's actually a very interesting way of looking at mental health. We say that we add something, or something new comes up in the day, and this part of the scales where my cursor is, if it goes down, then my body or my mind works out strategies to bring it back on par with this. So those are the strategies that we refer to as coping strategies. And every time I cope, I'm trying to restore the balance that I feel has gone out of control. Because being out of control is a sign of having a disturbed mental health. And that is the reason why we do it. So we are all familiar with this. I'm sure we can add even more signs of stress. The more I look at literature, the more evident it is. And again, there are many of us who do not even show any signs of stress. And yet we may be very stressed. And very often we come across people who say that, he had everything going well in his life or her life. I wonder what happened. Suddenly he had a heart attack. We never thought he was stressed. Maybe it's not because of stress. Maybe it could have been due to some other reasons. But very often it could also be that a person has masked his or her ability to show the signs of stress. And what are the different signs of stress? We have insomnia or lack of ability to speak. When we are highly stressed, as many of us went through during the pandemic and the lockdown, mental health professionals included, there was a loss of mental concentration. When you are highly stressed, you are distractible. You are not able to focus on your work in the same manner in which you could have done had you not been experiencing those high levels of stress. Absenteeism, very commonly we talk about the fact that many people cope by not going to work. Now that the lockdown is partially, it has been opened up, and a lot of campuses are opening up, a lot of people continue to stay away from work because the stresses that they imagine or are real with reference to public transportation. What if I contract something now, just when people have let their guards down? So all of this can lead to stress. We use clinical terminologies like depression, which is distinguished from sadness. Sadness is an emotion that all of us experience, just like stress is an aspect that all of us uh, experience. But depression is a clinical diagnosed condition, and and we'll tell you the qualitative difference between the two. Then extreme anger and frustration could also be a result of stress. Family conflict, when it spills over your work life balance. If we go back to the previous thing, this is what has taken the biggest beating during the pandemic, the work life balance, this whole concept of working from home. Where does the home end, where does the work begin? It's all seamless, and there are no boundaries any longer. So there's no question of balance, and which is why a lot of us have actually been so stressed out at various points of time. So broadly, if we were to look at, and then there are migraine, headaches, back problems, and all, which according to some of these authors, these are all what we would refer to as somatizing, where your psychological stressors are converted into bodily symptoms. So headaches, back problems. I give this example very often of women who come to meet a psychologist or a psychiatric social worker like myself, or a counselor basically, and they will have no psychological issues that they talk about. They will not say that I am not able to concentrate or any of that. They'll say, there's no other issue other than the fact that I have lower back pain. So they would have got themselves checked with an orthopedician. They would have got an MRI done. They would have done so many tests, and nothing wrong with them physically. And then somebody suggests to them, one of the doctors, that maybe you should meet a mental health professional. And when they come to you, we don't look at it as anything other than a mental health problem that is being expressed through a physical form. So the signs of stress can have physical signs, like it says here. It can have mental or emotional or psychological or cognitive signs. It can have behavioral signs. And of course, for most of us, it can have job stress related signs too. So cognitive, can somebody tell me what do we think comes under cognitive? Or emotional or physical? Let's start with physical, because I'm sure all of us are familiar with the physical signs of stress that we have been through. What typically happens, if you can just type it in the chat window and just tell me what typically are the physical signs of stress. When you see a person and you realize that this individual is stressed, what are the physical signs that you observe? I would be happy even if somebody wants to unmute and say it. Okay, should I move on? Would you like to take a moment? In physical signs of stress, we have muscular tension, we have headaches, we have elevated heart rate, add to that profuse sweating, where you feel that you are, clammy hands, sweating profusely, so much so that people say that, look, are you perfectly all right? Why are you sweating so much? All these are physiological signs that the body is under stress, perhaps. There could be other reasons for sweating also. I'm always careful not to make things sound like an all or none thing, because we can have sweating due to several reasons. We can have elevated heart rate because of so many reasons. But stress is one of the common ways in which we see these symptoms. So we have aches and pains. We have chest pain, or the feeling that your heart is racing, when it's rapidly beating and you have a rapid heartbeat, high signs of stress possible. Exhaustion, the fatigue, that there's nothing wrong with me physically, but I just feel fatigued. I feel like I can't work. I could work much more, but now suddenly my body seems to give up on me. Trouble sleeping. People who have problems with sleeping are often told that, why don't you try and sleep a little earlier in the day? But people say, I'm not able to sleep. Even if I go to bed at 9 o'clock, by the time I fall asleep, it's 1:30 or 2 in the morning. So these are signs that you are probably under a lot of stress. Dizziness or shaking. A lot of people complain of head spells, giddy spells, dizziness, headaches, high blood pressure, which is very common, muscle tension, jaw clenching, where the teeth are clenched and the entire facial muscles are very, very tightly drawn. Uh, Very often stomach or digestive issues, very, very common. Even if you see it among children or even among your own students, they might not have any other signs of stress other than saying that they have a stomach upset very commonly. And that could be because of physical signs of stress also. Trouble having sex for adult populations, where usually these are referred to eating, sleeping, work, and your sexual functioning. These are all known as biological symptoms. So these get affected first for all mental health issues, and a weak immune system. So we could have, a weak immune system also happening. Let me go back to signs of stress like feeling lonely, isolated. These are cognitive symptoms. Depressed. Of course, you have some physical symptoms there like diarrhea, pains, constipation, nausea. Pain is a very interesting phenomena when it comes to stress, because pain is very subjective. There is no instrument in the world to measure what is the intensity and severity of the pain that somebody is undergoing. If someone has lost a child, or has had a broken relationship, a failure in a relationship, or lost someone very dear, or a job or whatever, the pain that the person experiences it's entirely subjective. So we can't really classify it as physical alone, but uh, the fact that even a person has chest pain and all of this, it could be something physiological, it could be something mental health related. And cognitive aspects also include a generally negative outlook. This is one of the hallmarks of a cognitive sign of stress. When do you know that you are stressed? When you start having very negative thoughts. What kind of negative thoughts? Negative thoughts about myself. I am hopeless. I will never be able to do well. I don't think I'm going to be able to get this promotion, even though I'm preparing for it. So when you have those self-fulfilling prophecies, we tend to work in manners that do not help us realize our potential. Excessive worry, moodiness, like sometimes people are so stressed that you don't know, when you say something at one time they are fine, at another time they snap at you. So this kind of moodiness, irritability, agitation, and the inability to relax. More importantly, procrastinating or neglecting responsibilities. There is a deadline. You are generally a person who is very, very conscientious of your work, but you are missing deadlines. Is it a time perhaps for us to sit back and think and reflect? Am I burned out? Am I procrastinating because I'm stressed? Do I need to do something about it? Those are the issues. Maybe I'm doing something about it by resorting to alcohol or drugs or cigarettes when it comes to even in our, not just amongst us, but even among our student population. Are these access to or resorting to drugs or substances linked to their levels of stress? And rapid heartbeat, eating too much, too little, withdrawing from others, all of this is something that we feel. And let me put it on a slideshow. And, the dizziness or shaking and everything that we talked about. Cognitive signs also include panic attacks, where a person feels suddenly overwhelmed with all that he or she is going through or they are going through. I am very respectful of all genders. We don't look at it in binary. So it's not just he or she, but he or she or they. That is the pronoun that we would use for people who do not fall within the gender of men and women alone. So when you look at the panic attacks, it can happen across us to just feel suddenly overwhelmed. Sadness, and I said there's a difference between sadness and depression. Sadness is a common emotion that all of us face, but uh, which is normal, and it is absolutely considered as normal to experience sadness. In fact, if I've lost somebody or I've had a broken relationship, I would feel sad, and that's okay. But when does it become depression? It becomes depression when I am so overwhelmed by that feeling of sadness that it affects my day-to-day life, or it persists beyond a reasonable period of time. I've lost someone. I had a broken relationship at the age of 15. If till today I know I look, I must be looking much older, but even if few decades have gone by, if I persist in feeling sadness on that broken relationship, there's something wrong with the way I'm addressing my life issues. So one is persisting beyond a reasonable point of time. The second is when it starts disturbing your biological functions. It's no longer just sadness, but depression. When we say biological functions, we're talking about your appetite, your sleep, your work life, and your energy levels, as well as your sexual functioning for adult populations. So all of this gets affected in depression. The third is in depression, despite the fact that you make efforts, you are not able to very often control your own emotions, and you need a mental health support in order to bring. Whereas sadness, you can shake yourself out of it. Maybe after 1 month, even our students come and tell us, I was sitting and moping about this boy, ma'am, he left me, but then I suddenly shook myself out of it and I said, so what? Maybe this is for the best. So you're able to shake yourself out of these kind of emotions in sadness. But in depression, very often you get a lot of negative thoughts. And these negative thoughts are about the self, about the future, and about the world. And the extreme end of depression, unfortunately, is when a person has suicidal ideation or thinking about suicide, and uh, unfortunately then probably ends life. So there's a distinction between life on the one hand and death on the other. And most of us, we do kind of move towards being very happy and being very sad, but we largely keep the balance of our emotions. But there are people who are overwhelmed in this. So being on edge, being irritable, as if I'm walking on eggshells. When we walk on eggshells, we tread very carefully. So those could be signs, like, not being very sure. You have tremendous irritability or getting angry. And more importantly, which I've not added here, is your own self-esteem may get affected with all of these signs. And behavioral signs are also there, and that is about either drinking too much or too often. It's like we keep saying to a lot of people, it's perfectly all right to have a drink and not if a person is wanting to relax. Because the other day I was talking to a group of people who are highly stressed, senior management people who work in the front line. And they said, but ma'am, that's the only way in which we are able to cope. And we said, it's fine. But when does anything, again, I go back, for me, my favorite slide is always the balance. And when do we say that it is not all right is when you're drinking too much, when you lose that balance and control. And drinking too much necessarily means that if somebody moves from social drinking, which is once in a month or once in 3 months, or some people say just 3 times or 4 times in a year, I would probably have a drink, which is perfectly all right. But if the person moves towards wanting to drink every single day, and over time and after many years, the person ends up saying, I need to wake up in the morning and have a drink, otherwise I can't function in the day, which means it has disturbed your biological functions. When you say it's affecting my work, I can work only if I've had a drink. It can happen not just for alcohol, it can happen for coffee also, which we all know that in engineering colleges or medical colleges, professional colleges, a lot of students end up who are highly stressed drinking a lot of coffee. Coffee is a stimulant. So when you have stimulants, which means that your central nervous system is all the time aroused and you are very sharp, you're very vigilant. And there are people who say that if I don't have coffee, I'm not able to function. I have tremors in my hand, or I have my inability to concentrate. All of this means that it's affecting us somewhere deep down. And because I'm drinking so much now, I can't sleep. It's affecting my sleep. So it's like a circular pattern, because there is a difference, and a fine difference, between use, misuse, and abuse. Use of coffee is perfectly okay. Use of alcohol, I'm sure most people will say, is okay. Misuse and abuse is what we need to be concerned about. Misuse is using it for something other than what it is prescribed for. And abuse is where you have signs of both physical and psychological dependence. And then behavioral signs also, when people are highly stressed, might end up gambling, very often developing an eating disorder, neither eating too much or too little, but fluctuating between the two. And so the balance is completely off. Going back to that picture of the balance, where a person eats too much or too little, it is a sign of stress. Participating compulsively in sex, in shopping, or internet browsing, today's terminology, the social media usage, all of this. Again, the fine distinction is between use, misuse, and abuse. Using internet, browsing sites for shopping, perfectly fine. Misusing, not okay. Abusing, definitely not okay. Similarly, social media usage also, or smoking, use of drugs, and all of that. Now, just to get, not that I want to get very technical, but just to say that the earliest works of Selye on stress is what we continue to refer to. And what, Hans Selye has actually spoken about is that most of us, in our physiological state, when we are under stress, we do have a resistance, we have an alarm when there's a wake-up call for that stress. And that moves into a period where the body responds through resistance. We resist it through various efforts. And when we keep fighting it, then after that, successfully or otherwise, there is an exhaustion. So physiologically, this is what happens to us when we are under stress. So I'm going to just take a 5-minute exercise here, where I would like you to just write down, after 5 minutes of reflection, please put it in the chat box, at least most of you, that what are the top 3 stressors that you have uppermost in your mind at this time? Please only share something that is not too personal or not too intimate, and something that you can talk about which others can relate with. The reason being that this is a large group, it's online, and mental health issues should not be discussed, in a very casual manner. But stressors, yes, it's not strictly just a mental health issue. So if some of you can write it down, and what is the topmost stressor? So I'm going to, Dr. Mehdi, is that okay if I give a 5-minute period, and then we will have people typing in their responses? Please type it out and then let us. Thank you, Dr. Madhurima. I'll just get back when I get other responses also. Like I said, please share what, I'm sorry, there's a typographical, that you face today, not faces. So let me take what Professor Madhurima is saying. And she's saying that it's workplace politics, fear of contracting COVID, inability to socialize. Thank you. It's very much covering the contemporary context of the coronavirus and its impact on humankind. And workplace politics is something that is very relevant for us to talk of in an FDP, and how this can bother us in terms of our mental health, because all of us come across colleagues who are unreasonable. We sometimes report to people who are not empathetic. We have people who are with political inclinations, and dynamics, destroying or vitiating the workplace environment. So that is an extremely important stressor, which how many of you would say that you would raise your hand in agreement that these are topmost stressors for many of us? Let's take workplace politics. Can we just see a raise of hands over here? Okay, there are 3, I think, who have raised their hands. I would add mine over there as well. Okay, so if we were to look at, are there any other, yes, can I read it out? Thank you. Fear of coming out of your comfort zone. Very well articulated again. Workplace indecisiveness. May I request, is that Professor Dr. Sumit Kumar, to please just probably qualify by unmuting yourself if you're able to do that. Otherwise, just chat in the chat box, tell us what do we mean by workplace indecisiveness. Fear of coming out of the comfort zone is a very, very identifiable, relatable kind of stress. I'm just not sure if I understand workplace indecisiveness in the same way that you have written it. So may I request you to just type it out or explain that to us, please? And in the meanwhile, are there anybody else, even if it's not 3, behavioral stress, shopping or internet? Yes. Lack of sleep and overthinking. Yes, very important what you say. And, the interesting aspect, and why I was smiling when I said that this is interesting, is the fact that overthinking is a word that we use so often in India. In its entirety, it's not really known for that outside. We use it more in, it's not really Indian English, but it's a very relatable concept in India. So when we say overthinking, interesting the way you have conceptualized it again. And you're saying that behavioral stress, by doing all this shopping or internet, over internet or otherwise, can also be a topmost stressor right now, possibly. Thank you, all of you who are sharing. It's very important to make this as interactive, because any class related to stress and others cannot be just theoretical. It has to be with interactive participation. So thank you for sharing that. Is there anyone else who would like to place it on the chat box? While we get an explanation on this workplace indecisiveness, I'm going to try and move on just so that we are mindful of the time also. So if we were to, so this is a simple exercise just to see that, there's no point talking about what stressors are, what is the world facing, what are students facing, if we ourselves are not willing to examine our own levels of stress and stressors. And that is the reason why I thought an exercise is always important. In my aspect, overthinking is the main stress to me, and also workplace politics plays a next role to stress. I am so happy that, there are some of you who are sharing this so clearly and so articulately. Workplace politics seems to be coming up, and I see a pattern over here. I'm just wondering whether, we can see what do we mean by workplace politics and why it's affecting some of us. The aspect on indecisiveness, what I meant to say, that sometimes we couldn't share our views or opinions where we feel that we are going wrong, but no one pays heed over it. How to handle such situations. We'll come to that definitely. Thank you for explaining that on what we meant by indecisiveness. And, that when we feel that we are going wrong, but no one pays heed over it, as in the fact that there aren't people to listen. So we don't have a very clear line of support mechanism. We will come to that in just a moment, if I can go through some of these slides. So this is how some of us feel when it comes to stress, that we don't see a way out. We feel we are overwhelmed, overthinking, that there is possibly no way out of this without some damage or the other happening. There is a way out, but each way out is also, when I weigh it in my mind, it is full of problems. And so therefore I don't know, and this is classically what we refer to in psychology as an approach conflict, or an approach avoidance conflict. When we say approach avoidance, we have one clear choice. We have something. If we take a decision, we want to avoid something. But in approach, whatever I take has problems, it's full of problems. So what do I do in such a situation? How do I handle it? Like, the chat questions are asking. But for us, first, it's important to know that there are positive ways of looking at stress, and we use the terms technically to distinguish between eustress and distress. Eustress being a more positive connotation. Like I said right in the beginning, there is no negative connotation to the word stress per se. Let's say, for example, that eustress are all those stressors that are positive, that energize you, are generally short term, but they can help you in being motivated, help you to improve your performance. And it's something that we can handle. So eustress is not something that we get broken down by most often. I'll give you an example. It's actually from a very scientifically studied area of stress, where we have Holmes and Rahe, who have brought out 100 list of stressors. And the topmost 10 stressors include stresses like losing a child, losing a spouse, failures. All of that comes in the top 10. But in the top 10, there are also 2 or 3 stressors which are normally not considered stress, but create a lot of stress. Can somebody tell me what those could be? They are good events that happen in life, but they are also included as the top 10 stressors. One of them being marriage. somebody has posted something. Moving house, marriage, childbirth. For a man or a woman, having a new child coming into your lives is a stressor. It's a positive stress, yet it stresses you out. There are people who are not able to deal with that initially. But say getting a promotion, you're going up for a new position to a new location. Moving house, which I can see on the chat, is I think that has come in as a direct message, but very important, because there's so many issues with the way in which we have to address and our support infrastructure. It also depends on so many factors from age. Maybe when I was in my 20s, moving house was not so daunting. When I'm in my 40s or 70s or 80s, maybe it will be that much more stressful. So all of these may not be in itself positive or negative issues, but they do cause stress. Distress, on the other hand, is generally feeling unpleasant, depletes one of energy. It can be short term, it can be long term. It decreases overall performance. So all of this, which you are talking about, whether it is work politics, work environment being affected, yes, these are sometimes, and we don't know how to handle it sometimes, because we've tried whatever coping mechanisms, but it's not working. And this leads very often to physical health problems and mental health problems and emotional depletion. So much so that it no longer creates the kind of excitement that your work used to have. I don't look forward to going to work if my work politics is so poor, or I'm disrespected or otherwise. So as colleagues, some of us will become heads of the department, we'll become professors. So how do we lead others towards a change so that we are able to address issues of mental health? So work-related stress is one of the major things that I would always talk to with colleagues. In fact, we could have just called this entire session workplace stress and mental health. But we know that stress, even in the workplace, can be affected due to factors outside the workplace. My family, my socioeconomic condition, my neighborhood where I live. So many of these things can affect my workplace stress also. Just like my workplace can affect my family life, can affect, so many issues. Stress by higher authorities, stresses due to heavy workload. Absolutely, absolutely correct. Because, which is why I said, if some of you move on to higher positions and you are in a position where you are the head of the department or a dean or whatever positions we all take on, a vice chancellor someday, it's very important that we understand even more so as to what do people go through when they are stressed, and how our demands should be matched to the knowledge and the abilities of people. If we make more demands, let me give a simple example again from the COVID-19 context, and the fact that we've all had to adapt to to the use of technology for our learning teaching. Our pedagogies that have been carefully cultivated over years has had to undergo a sea change in the way in which we make ourselves continue to make ourselves relevant and meaningful to students. That we have to continue to look at teaching learning environments as being enriching for the student, even if the mode in which I am used to delivering a course has changed. It has added tremendous work-related stress to all of us across the board. Just like that famous poem that talked about death being a leveler, the coronavirus has also been a leveler, but yet we are all traveling in different boats, but we are weathering the same storm. The fact that all of us are affected across the world, undeniable. But I may have some privileges that my colleague will not have. So just because I am able to perform my job doesn't mean that I can make demands of my colleagues saying, see, even I have the same issue and I'm coming. I may have the same issue, but I'm a different person with different coping mechanisms, with different social support, with different financial resources, physical resources. So we are challenging each other very often. To give a very simple example, why I say it's a leveler is that the fact that at people who belong to my age group or age generate, let's say stage, not age, stage of life, we may have missed being as technologically sophisticated as some of our younger colleagues who may be younger by just a decade or so. And so therefore, when we are suddenly required to adapt to a new working environment, that also causes stress, because then my dependence on other colleagues goes up. Whereas earlier, their dependence on me for many other things might have been higher. So there is a demand which is new to a lot of people. Now, added to that is the fact that so this might answer some of the chat comments that are there. What is the job content itself? Is that stressing us out? What is the workload and work pace? Has that changed? Have we been given a lot more workload than we can humanly, physically deliver with quality? Have our working hours extended? And what is the level of participation that I have in decisions? What level of control or autonomy do I have over my own life and over my work? And this is a study that was identified work-related stresses in 2004. It is most meaningful for us to discuss it today in 2020 or 2021, because all of this has changed in just a matter of 1 year. This has changed. The reasons are sometimes to do with career development. People who are frustrated that for years and years they keep applying and they do not get elevated to higher levels of functioning. The status, pay, we all work in different universities where the pay structures are very different. The stability of receiving a salary is very different. There is a job insecurity for those of us who work on contract as compared to those who are in more stable positions. The lack of promotion, there are people who say, I don't see a future for myself here. I just feel I'm going to keep doing this job endlessly. Under promotion or over promotion. Very frustrating for the mental health of other colleagues to see somebody getting a promotion when they don't deserve to, in objectively, not subjectively. Or a person who deserves to be promoted but is not, due to politics at work, due to the fact that there are ways in which our society is structured where patriarchal norms and institutions are in place. So even in a university, it pans out in the same way. A woman having to work and move ahead has to work twice as hard to be even visible, to be in the reckoning as compared to men. And this is a reality in many of our places. And so do we look at certain work as low value, low social value work, then being overskilled, semi-skilled, unclear roles, conflicting roles within the same job, and responsibility for people? I can tell you conflicting roles within the same job applies to me so much. I'm here as a professor, but I'm also in administrative capacity. Very often, I don't know which hat I should wear when I'm talking to students. I don't want to talk to them like an administrator. I would rather talk to them as a teacher would with students. And this kind of demands that are made, but sometimes you need to wear an admin hat also when you become deans, when you become center chairs and all of that, and continuously dealing with other people and their problems. Interpersonal relationships, inadequate, inconsiderate, unsupportive supervision. I think this is what was hinted at. When we have colleagues who are not empathizing, whose interpersonal relationships at work are constantly a source of friction. And the kind of relationships we have with co-workers, and where there is bullying, harassment, violence, we know we have legislative mechanisms in place. We have the committee that is usually sitting there to look at sexual harassment. But sometimes harassment is not just sexual or gender related. It could be due to various other reasons. It could be even with a woman supervisor harassing men colleagues. It could be any of these issues. So how do we deal with all of this? Isolated, solitary work, when people don't recognize your work, or when the organizational culture that you have is stressing you out. You are a person who's very perfectionistic, you want to be there, you're very punctual, disciplined. You land up in an organizational culture where everything is dhila, everything people come as and when they wish, and there is no leadership or poor leadership, and there's no clarity about the kind of department or institution or system that we are setting up. Those could also stress you out. You can also have stresses related to home work interface, conflicting demands of work and home. For most of us in this last 1.5 years, it has been sharply brought into our awareness. Or lack of support at home for domestic issues. You want to, you are fulfilling your role. And here I would like to quote Ms. Indra Nooyi, who as a CEO of Pepsi was on record as when she was the CEO. And she said that, when I reach home and I open my door, I don't, it's not the CEO walking in. It's a woman who has to wash the vessels, who has to do the housework. So I forget that I'm a CEO when I walk into the house. And so you do realize that if you have the resources and you have the support infrastructure, that stress is slightly reduced. But for many people, the reality is in a country like us that we do not have that kind of support. And even if you have issues, maybe they are confidential, you can't share them with people at home all the time. So therefore, we come back to how does it affect us? So all of these things that I've already mentioned, I'm not reading out the list any longer, but basically to say that, are not handling it leads to these problems. I was looking at some of the data that is there in terms of studies done in India on engineering colleges, professional colleges, medical colleges. And there are a number of studies where people have studied, what happens to students in engineering colleges particularly. So we are now talking about a student population. While it is very important that we first understand our own mental health stresses, why it is important that I'm bringing this issue of students is that we don't know how fragile somebody's mental health is. So when we speak to people, we may end up saying things that are harsh. Maybe in itself, and especially today in an online space. If I was having an offline class, I'd probably have no problem if I say to a student, of course, in Tata Institute of Social Sciences, we are very, very particular about how we communicate with students. We do not bring up a lot of issues that you see very often discussed in other universities. But in TISS, a lot of these issues are absolute no. Like say, for example, even if you look at a person and you see that there is a considerable weight gain that the person has had. As a mental health person, I know that it's possible that weight gain can occur suddenly, rapidly due to stress. As a mental health professional, I know that. But I would not ask the student something like, there's so much of a change in your appearance. You've put on a lot of weight, right? I might not mean anything other than concern. But addressing that issue needs a different approach altogether. The fact that I've recognized it, I would probably, keep our channels of communication open so that if the student wants to come and talk about it, that's the choice of the student. But my talking about it very often can add to the stressor that the student is already undergoing, because you're trying to hide the fact that you're stressed. It's just a bit of weight gain. But if people start talking about it all the time, oh my God, and friends can be very cruel. They would say things like, itna mota ho gaya hai, kya hua? And the student ends up feeling more stressed than you might probably know. Simple examples, like we know that students are adapting to new environments when they come in. Some of the studies that I went through for this lecture was very interesting, because they've studied students across first year, second year, third year undergraduate programs and final year, and seeing what is the adaptation and where is the stress higher. And the fact that these are some of the common stressors quoted in different studies: change in environment, adapting to the change, learning, and the fact that you're residing suddenly, for a lot of students, first time they're living in a hostel as compared to having been at home, and fitting in, trying to be one of a uniform group so that you are not seen as an standing out person, right? You're not seen as an outlier. And that process is very, very difficult for a lot of students. Then the fact that there is a competitive nature of work, that there are job insecurities for our students also, or financial problems that students go through, which they are negotiating at an individual level. And we know that many of these institutions and our universities are very high. Our own institute where I work the fees are very high. And so we know that these are issues that students go through. Relationship building across genders, very commonly the kind of problems that students who die by suicide would have talked about is a relationship failure. Somebody breaking off with them after having engaged in a relationship for a few years. And the other issue related to gender is about your own gender identity. In our institution, we do have, ours is probably the only institution in the country where we have a gender neutral hostel. It's not just a boys' hostel and a girls' hostel. We've grappled with these questions in the past. And we've talked about in other universities. I remember even in Mizoram University, what if a person doesn't identify himself or herself or themselves as male or female? What is the kind of support infrastructure that we offer? And gender issues, financial stressors, high expectations that families have. The moment you've joined an engineering college, you're expected to do certain things, to deliver certain things, like a plum job. So these are the stressors that are, and I'm talking to people who already know all these issues in much greater depth. But if we look at only one of the statistics as far as the National Crime Records Bureau is concerned, with reference to suicides of students, we've seen that there is a huge increase in the number of students between the ages of 15 to 24, from 2016, 17, 18, systematically it's going up from 9,400 students to 9,905 to now 10,159. That's a steep increase. And I'm dreading to see the reliable statistics that come out after the pandemic and the lockdown. And, particularly, not all of these are from engineering colleges, let's be very clear. But we are saying that on an average, if you look at any suicide data in the country, unfortunately, it is the people in the younger age groups where it is higher in preponderance. And in that, if you look at, gender breakup, that also tells its own figures. And today, the statistics is such, in 2018, we are saying 28 students every day. That's almost more than one student per hour is dying by suicide somewhere as we speak, which is highly alarming. And between 95 and 2019, we have lost 1.7 lakh students. And of this, 52% were more in the last millennial decade, first decade of the millennium. Which states have a preponderance? Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Madhya Pradesh, Karnataka, and Uttar Pradesh. These are also the states which have the higher populations, right? And so we come to now linking stress to mental health. And what do we refer to as mental health? Because dying by suicide is definitely not just a sign of stress, it's a sign of a disturbed mental health. And we are saying that mental health is when we have disturbed cognitive, emotional well-being. And they are saying it's not just that I don't have depression doesn't mean I'm mentally healthy. I don't have anxiety doesn't mean I'm mentally healthy. So we are looking at people who are able to realize their own abilities, cope with normal stresses. The pandemic, I keep on underlying, is not a normal stress. It's an extraordinarily abnormal stress that all of us have had to face. But mental health, we are saying, is in relation to normal stresses. Can a person cope? Can a person work productively, fruitfully? And in addition to working, is the person able to contribute to his or her community? So all of these are important. And there were some studies that I'll keep quoting on second, third, and final year undergraduates. There was this study which said that of 152, I put the reference over here, of 152 engineering students interviewed, 52 said that they suffered from stress, 79 suffered from anxiety, and more than a third, 37.5, from depression. Depression, I told you, is different from sadness. So there's actually diagnosable conditions based on scales that were used. And the highest proportion, of course, was faced by people who said that they were experiencing a lot of stress. Stress is something that we can try to prevent, and promoting mental health by preventing stress, that itself of preventing not stress but preventing the ill effects of stress. So the common stressors from various studies about students moving away from families, staying in boarding houses, loneliness keeps coming up, and new environment, academic demands, financial strains, relationship with new um, people. And on ideation, when there was an unpublished thesis that I came across of Anjana Prusti, who I think submitted her thesis to Sikkim University, and she has studied suicidal ideation. How much do people contemplate, which is a precursor to dying by suicide? And in that, she saw that day scholars had higher, I mean, not she, in another study by Sneha Dabir and El Kunchwar, they studied that day scholars had higher suicidal ideation as compared to hostelites in their study. Whereas in Anjana Prusti, she saw that suicidal ideation, loneliness, depression, and having psychoticism or being out of touch with reality when we say psychotic. So those were much higher, and it was a significant predictor of suicidal ideation in undergraduate college students if students displayed depression, family environments that were disturbed, or loneliness. So in mental health, we talk about now coming to the positive things, and so to be able to end with a little more understanding of what we can do about it. Because like I said, most of the things I've said probably you're already aware of. And we talk about 12 subtasks that are very important for us to use when we are saying that we need to concentrate on our mental health. Do we have a sense of worth about ourselves? Do our students have a sense of worth? Sense of worth means that people are not disparaging them. See, a person might fail in an exam, but that doesn't translate or become equal to failure in life. This is something that we constantly tell our students over here, that it's important that you value yourself. You may not have passed in some of the exams, but you are an extremely good writer, or you're an extremely good artist. So where is the sense of worth and value coming for you? That we need to build on in our students, and not look at exams as ways of defining who is a success or a failure, who is competent or incompetent, because all of us have different competencies, multiple competencies. We have a concept called multiple intelligences. And sense of control, do I have an autonomy over my life? Or do I just feel that my entire life is going away? When people were discussing in the chat about workplace politics, it's important that our mental health doesn't get disturbed by us knowing whether we have a sense of control. Sometimes we don't have a sense of control because the boss or the supervisor or the head of the department or XYZ is unreasonable. So I do not have that sense of control. Realistic beliefs is important as part of your mental health. Emotional awareness, coping, problem solving, creativity. People who are creatively pursuing, we have, whether it is photography or painting or poetry or writing, all of that is very necessary for mental health. And a sense of humor. I say, even in the worst of situations, can you have a sense of humor? That's important. It shows that you have control over your mental health. Something that is very neglected in mental health is the role of nutrition and exercise, because they are seen as biological and not psychological. Very important for psychological well-being. Are you eating right? Are you having enough physical exercise? Because all of that will make a difference to your mental health. Self-care. Are you looking after yourself? You don't have to be narcissistic. You don't have to be always ready for a photograph, but by and large, are you well kept? That's important. Your stress management itself shows how well linked your mental health is to stress. Gender identity and cultural identity, not talked about much, but becoming very important when we talk about mental health. And the sense of control, like I said, is having a feeling of autonomy, choosing how you spend your time. How many women in our country are able to spend their time according to their choice of doing your own work in your own way at work? Are we allowed that autonomy at work? That's important. And we talk about realistic belief. We talk about, depression as being linked to negative views. It's like a triangle where we have negative views about the world, negative views about oneself, and negative views about the future. All of this can get affected and will in turn affect your mental health. So people who are depressed, very often they misinterpret facts and experiences in a very, negative way. And what kind of negative thoughts? You can have polar thoughts, all or none, seeing everything in black or white. If she did not wish me in the morning when I wished her today, she is unhappy with me. It's an all or none kind of thinking. It's a very negative thought. I may not have wished somebody just simply because I was preoccupied. I may not have wished somebody because I have earphones on and I didn't hear her. I did not wish maybe because I was, not able to hear her at all. So just the fact that I didn't wish cannot become the indicator for she's not happy with me. So this is a very negative way of thinking. Another thing is abstraction. You ignore all successes and you're left with only the minuses, the sadness, and all of that. Or overgeneralization implies that one will do poor at one thing and assume failure in all related things. Just because a student has not passed in 4 subjects out of a possible 6 or 7 doesn't mean that he is equal to failure. He may be excellent in something else, in some other area. And is our curriculum designed to be sensitive to such students also? So when it comes to coping, there are ways of looking at it. Do we move with, like in compromising? Sometimes we move with the issue and try to arrive at some kind of an issue. Moving towards, if I give in, I won't get hurt. So therefore I give in. Or moving against, when I The individual threatens those perceived as a threat to avoid getting hurt. So you are confrontationist. That's also a way of my coping, because I don't want to get hurt. That's the thing at the end of the day. And moving away. If I do not let anyone close to me, I won't get hurt. So avoidance. All of these can be adaptive or maladaptive coping strategies. So strategies, important, simple tips like exercise. When you feel symptoms of stress coming on, we tell clients who come for counseling very often that, when they are very, very stressed, we just say, start a routine of walking. And at the time of walking, initially they may be thinking a lot, but put on some music and keep walking. It does help over a period of time. Short walks, brisk walks, energetic power nap, power walks, all of that. At the end of the day, and this is very important, when you begin the day and at the end of the day, we can just take a moment to think about all our problems in the day and focus on how we can address it the next day. Morning, when you wake up, you remind yourself what you thought about. Simple ways in which we can manage our stress levels. Set goals. Consider talking to a therapist. No harm at all. I hope all the colleges and departments where you are from do have counselors. We are very, very clear that we cannot handle it as teachers. We don't know what students are going. There's a conflict of interest if a student, even though I'm trained in mental health, we discourage students to come and talk to the faculty. Not discourage, it's not permitted. Instead, we have appointed 2 whole-time counselors whom students can go and talk without any fear of, if I talk to my teacher, maybe it will influence positively or negatively. I can be biased. If I feel somebody is going through a lot of problems at home, maybe I feel very empathetic and I allow her not to submit the assignment. But that's also not correct. But if she talks to a counselor, they'll give them tips on how to work. So all of these, things of how to prevent stress through relaxation techniques, through meditation, through self-care, through staying connected with people. And that is why physical distancing is a term rather than social distancing, because social distancing will not work. It will only add to your stressors. You need to be connected to people. And for team building, we look at risk. We design action plans to see in the assessment of risk, who is at risk for stress, being most stressed out in my department or in my university. Examine the work conditions and implement the action plan. So that's it. I think it's 12 o'clock and I did make it interactive while we were talking, but I'm not sure whether we have enough time. Yeah. I think you're not unmuted.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am, for your nice talk. I cannot say nice. It was an outstanding talk. Because, ma'am, everybody is facing nowadays this modern scenario. Everybody is facing the stress. It may be in the personal, it may be in the official, it may be in different categories. But how to manage, we don't know actually. That is, and everybody is facing problem. So you have told in very good way. I think every participants can get the inputs for their personal life actually, personal as well as professional life. Thank you, ma'am, again. And if anybody has any question, please write in the chat box or question and answer section. So we can ma'am is there, or also you can directly contact to the ma'am also. She's very helpful, and that I have told already, and ma'am has told already. She is in now Guwahati, is the deputy director of that Tata Institute of Social Sciences. So you can contact also if you have, or if in present any question is there, you can immediately write in the chat box and question and answer. And again, I'm telling you, when some talks is going on, you always write the whatever question will come, immediately you write in the chat box, because after that immediately we can take it the question and anything we can ask to our distinguished distinguished professors. So Please, I think, ma'am, there is no question till now. So
that's fine. I have just put my email ID in case there's anybody who would like to write in later.
yes,
Yeah. Thank you so much.
yes.
Thanks a lot, Professor Mehti. I enjoyed actually interacting, and it was nice to get those comments in the chat box. Thank you again very much.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. And I think next section with the Professor Madhurima, ma'am, and she will give the talk on 12:15. So another 10 minutes we have. They can go for the break. Then we can start the Madhurima ma'am's talk.
Sure.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. And thanks to all the participants and to Mizoram University. Thank you.
Thank you.